So welcome to the first of what I hope will be a weekly look at the handicap movers and shakers in the National Hunt field. A bit apprehensive flying solo without the linguistical skills of Jeff Stafford and Tom Collins alongside me, but like all good embryonic 3-mile chasers, hopefully I'll progress with each run and minimise the mistakes as I go along. For those of you that don't know, many of you will, every Tuesday morning at the early hour of 7 o'clock, the BHA handicapping team released the new ratings for horses that have run in the previous week, and that runs from a Sunday through to a Saturday. So if you run on a Sunday, you don't get your mark the following Tuesday. You have to wait effectively 10 days. Always one of the interesting mornings for me, seeing if something I think has run quite well has perhaps dropped in the handicap ratings, or something that I think has run particularly poorly hasn't been particularly kindly dealt with. So I've got a few to go through, so we'll get on with it. The first on the list is the Jamie Stone trained That's All Right Gino, who anyone that watches the SBK betting podcast will know I napped this weekend. Sadly, it wasn't to be. He ran a good race, finished second at 12-1. I just felt he'd been crying out for this step up to 2 mile 4 furlongs, particularly when finishing a really good third at Newbury over 2 miles, where he stayed on from a long way back to finish about 3 lengths behind Fred Arms, who's now rated 136, and he was giving him £9 and just a length behind Orkin Risk, who's now rated 145. Didn't jump well the next time at Doncaster, and I got a feeling that was largely because his jumping was put under pressure at the speed he was going. Now, he had no answer whatsoever for Stage Star, who was really impressive, but I think he's probably a graded horse in the making. I wouldn't be surprised if the Paul Nicholls team swerve Cheltenham and perhaps head to the graded race at the Aintree Festival. But he's a decent horse. Couldn't live with him, but I thought he ran a great race, stayed on really well up the hill. His jumping was much, much better, just going that half a gear slower. Wasn't overly slick at the last 2, but I don't think that caused him to lose too much momentum. Handicap has put him up £3 to a mark of 141, but I think that's a mark he can still be competitive off, provided he's kept at this 2 mile 4 furlong trip. And I think in time, as he learns to relax, he'll probably stay a little bit further. So he's certainly first on my list. The next one also ran at Cheltenham, and it's the Harry Fry trained Phoenix Way. I think it's fair to say he's probably not gone on as expected. And I think perhaps the fall he had at Kempton in the Coral Trophy last year knocked his confidence, and it's been a case of building him back up again. Now on Saturday, he stayed really well, eye-catchingly up the hill from a very uncompromising position in a race where the winner, Il Ridotto, the second, Fugitive, and even the third horse, Precious Eleanor, were ridden fairly positively. He was out the back. He made a bad mistake. I think it was the 10th fence, just as the pace was quickening, which put him on the back foot. But he stayed on relentlessly up the hill, finished 5th, I think it was, never nearer. And he's been dropped now £4 in 2 runs. And I don't think either of those 2 runs have been particularly bad. He's back on his last winning mark of 140. That's telling. Now that win came over 2 mile 5. He was then sent off at that in that Kempton race that I mentioned previously, where he had a very bad fall at the 3rd fence, co-favourite for the Coral Trophy. That was off a mark of 146. Wouldn't surprise me if that was the target again, and off a mark of 140. I think he's well weighted to go very close wherever he turns up, provided it's a stiff 2 mile 4 or further, or an easy 3 miles. 2 more from Cheltenham over hurdles now. The first is the Dan Skelton trained Pembroke. Another really impressive performer by Sire Sensation Blue Brazil, the sire of Constitution Hill, amongst others. He's been left on a mark of 136 after finishing second in the Grade 2 novice hurdle at Cheltenham over the weekend, over 2 mile 4. And I think it's plain to say he just didn't stay. Travelled into the race really stylishly, looked the winner turning for home, and then just flattened out up the hill and was beaten by, I think, a good horse and a stronger stayer. His form over 2 miles, he's won twice at Wetherby and Ludlow, particularly the Ludlow run, I think reads really well. The second horse, Amron Star, 16 lengths back in receipt of £6. He's now rated 115. And the third horse, Western Zephyr, was 17 lengths behind. He's now rated 121. So on this mark of 136, I think Pembroke is still really nicely weighted for handicaps. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if the handicap target they have in mind is the county hurdle. Dan Skelton's won it 3 times in the last 7 years. He's the only British trainer to get close to the Irish in this race in recent times. I think a mark of 136. He'll go there now fresh. That's always been the MO they've taken with their county hurdle horses. I mean, most of them are run December and early January and then gone straight to the festival. I think it's unlikely you'll see Pembroke again. I think off a mark of 136, he should get into the county. He's available at 14 to 1. And I think that's a decent price, and I think that might well be the target. The second horse is from a smaller operation, and that of Tom Simmons, and it's History Bear. And he ran in the 2-mile closing handicap hurdle at Cheltenham. And I mean, I'm not a clock man, but I'd be surprised if anything ran the last quarter mile quicker than this horse. At the top of the hill, he was flat out outpaced and looked to be struggling. And you wouldn't have been surprised if he'd been pulled up before the second last, but he made relentless progress, flew up the hill to be beaten just 5 lengths and was never nearer. Now that's virtually a carbon copy of his run in this race last year under Eamon Coleman, where he actually finished third, but again looked very outpaced, stayed on up the hill, and I had him pegged as going up in trip to be a surefire winner, and it didn't happen. They tried him on soft ground over 2 miles at Sandown, where he pulled up. And they then tried him over 2 mile 4, I think it was Hexham, where again he didn't run all that well. But those 2 runs coincided with the Tom Simmons yard sort of losing a bit of form for the remainder of the season. So I think off this mark now of 126, he's well worth trying over a trip of 2 mile 4 in the future, and he's bang on my radar. I think there's plenty of room in this mark, and I was really impressed with his finishing effort. The final one from Saturday comes from Doncaster, and it's in a slightly lower grade, and it's a horse of Ben Pauline's called the Macon Lugnatic. He's very difficult to win with. It's a long time since he's got his head in front, but he was very well supported. Fairly big gamble that went awry on Saturday at Doncaster, backed into 5 to 2. He could only finish 5th and just sort of plugged on into 5th, looked outpaced all the way up the home straight. But he's down to a mark of 108 now. He didn't stop galloping. He just looks plain slow, to be honest with you. And I think he'd be interested over an extreme trip, whether one of those regional nationals, got the Devon National coming up at Exeter. He might just get in at the bottom of the weights there. He'd certainly carry a low weight. He goes well right-handed. He does need decent ground. So if it was a wet February, Exeter can get quite soft. That might not be the idea. But I think he's worth having in your notebook. If he pops up over extreme distance, I think he's well worth following. Then the final 2 for this week actually come, they've not run for a while, but they've been in my notebook, been on my radar, so I thought they were worth sharing with you. The first one is trained by Christian Wizard Williams, and it's Kitty's Light. Now, all this horse's best form, certainly in recent times, has been over trips well in excess of 3 miles, notably when third off 145 in the Bet365 Gold Cup at Sandown last year, and when second in the Scottish National up at Ayr off a marker 143 over 4 miles, where if it hadn't been for the presence of his stablemate Win My Wings, who was just on a crest of a wave, very well handicapped, and had the advantage of Rob James stealing £7 off her back, Kitty's Light, if she hadn't been there, Kitty's Light would have run out a very impressive 5-length winner. I'm certain that his season has been geared around the back end of the year, Scottish Grand National, and then perhaps back onto the Bet365 Gold Cup. His runs this year haven't been great. His last one was more promising, but he's down to a mark of 132 now. Now, bearing in mind those 2 runs I mentioned previously came off a mark of 145 and 143. I think he's going to head back to Scotland off a mark, certainly in the 130s. 16 to 1 is available ante-post. I think that's a great price. Christian Williams has perhaps had a bit of a quiet time for the winter, but I expect him to get his horses flying for the spring, and he's bang on my radar for the big Scottish feature Grand National. And then my final one is an old favourite. Anyone that's ever watched a SBK podcast, it's likely this horse has cropped up. He's done me well over the years, and it's the Evan Williams trained Don Levant. I've got a real soft spot for him. He's been a successful hurdler. He's now off a mark £13 lower over fences than he is over hurdles, and this season I think has been about developing his jumping. They aborted a chase career back in 2019 where he unseated and he finished second at Hereford, but it was a race at Hereford that he should have won. He didn't jump all that confidently, and he's then had a successful career over hurdles, ridden really effectively by Evan's daughter Isabel, hold up tactics and weaving their way through the field where they do require a little bit of luck in running. But he's off a pretty hefty mark now over hurdles, and they're exploring fences again. And I think it's gone quite well. I certainly saw progression from run 1 to run 2. He looked fairly assured in his jumping. That was over trips short of his best. And I think he's now primed, ready to run a decent race. Evan Williams is very shrewd. This mark now looks plenty workable. And if he pops up in a 2-mile 4 or even a 3-mile handicap, I think he's primed to go close, and I haven't lost faith with him yet. So that's the first edition of Handicap Movers and Shakers. Please like and subscribe this video, add some comments. As with everything, nobody's perfect, and you may well see comments, questions in the comments section that you know the answer to and seems obvious to you, but Twitter, YouTube can be quite a toxic place. Try and be civil, try and be kind, and understand that people only ever get better by asking questions, and sometimes the answer is apparent to you even if it's not to them. So hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back again next week. The intention is to have written, visual and audio content available, so however you like to get your information, hopefully I'll have something for you, and over time I'll hopefully build the platform up to be bigger than it is today.